Good evening, David, and thanks for everyone to join us tonight on this very first Fireside Chat at ARPAS UK. My name is Anne-Lise, and together with David, we are directors of ARPAS. And the purpose of this Fireside Chat is to give some background information and maybe give some color to our statement made end of January entitled UK PDRA-01, Welcome Standstill as Advocated.
Thanks, Anne-Lise. Good evening, everyone. In November last year, we issued our position paper where we put in there that we were hoping that, and this was from feedback from members, that we hope that the CA put a standstill on any major changes to PDRA-01. And we're really pleased that in their announcement on the 24th of January that actually came out and have confirmed that we've got a year, I think, pretty much. Was it a year they said that?
Yeah.
We've got a year without any major changes to PDRA-01, which is really good. Actually, earlier in, I think it was in December, I was at a Royal Aeronautical Society meeting for ARPAS, where one of the CAA members was there, and he said they are looking at SORA methodology for PDRA-01. So, I mean, there's a discussion to be had there around how that might affect PDRAs.
Yeah, and we have to share with you, together with David and the other members of ARPAS, when we listened to those signals about potential shift on UK PDRA-01, we thought, well, why on earth would they want to change anything? DISCO was a few months away, a few months ago. It was a success recognized by the industry, and we really couldn't understand the benefit of changing again for no good reason the UK PDRA. And I have to admit, and you will agree with me in a second, I'm sure, David, that it also raised some concerns, because when we looked at what was happening on the EASA side, we discovered that actually the standard scenarios and PDRAs that have been published by EASA are very conservative. And so the idea that the CA would be reviewing the PDRA-01 on this side of the channel with an idea of a convergence towards EASA was actually a concern.
Yeah, I've got, I just if Annabelle can bring it up to show display, I've got the EASA webpage with the PDRA. Maybe we can have a quick look at that. Is that up there now? Yeah, great. So that's
yeah,
up there
showing
now.
up.
So this is the EASA PDRA. Now, this is the PDRAs they've got, and they've diverged quite significantly from where the PDRA-01 was originally in, was it January 2021 when they first came out, when the regulations all changed. And I suppose the closest to what we've got with our PDRA is the PDRA-01 with agricultural works and short-range cargo ops. Now, originally, I think, and Anne-Lise, I think you might agree with me here, that originally that also was just for normal VLOS operations. I think it wasn't that specific. But if we look down to it, we've got this controlled ground area and ground risk buffer, where basically that means that there's no uninvolved people are allowed into that controlled ground area. So that's quite a sizable chunk and quite a considerably more conservative PDRA than we are used to operating in the UK. I mean, I think these are really looking for future flight. And don't get me wrong, future flight is really important and we should be looking at future flight. But it's almost like I feel that the operators like me operating Mavic 3s or even bigger M300s and Inspires are almost being forgotten about.
I would add one point.
Sorry,
Dave. Yeah, I would add one point on my reading as well of the evolution of the PDRAs or STS that were initially relatively similar to the UK version, UK PDRA-01, is you see that little C5. I think what an additional element that came over the last few months is that you must fly as well. Your operation must be conducted with a drone that is class mark C5 or an equivalent. And that C5 means that it's got a flight termination system, like a parachute. So if you think about it, I think hardly any drones are equipped in the UK with a former flight termination system. So, I mean, literally, it's controlled ground area, and on top of everything, you need an FTS. So it may not be for every PDRAs, but at least for some of them that I looked at, that could have been a convergence of our UK PDRA. So I think it's fair to say that when I talk to our counterparts on the continent, they are very concerned about the fact that those PDRAs are so conservative they become useless. And actually, I listened to a EASA conference back in October with the drone industry. And I was sort of surprised by the numbers to see how few operators had adopted those PDRAs. So let me find my notes so that I don't misquote anything. Back in June 2024, 1,177 operators had adopted the EU STS-01 in the entire EASA land. So if you compare our 3,000 operators versus a little more or less 1,200 in the EASA land, it gives you an idea that for now, those scenarios are actually not really adopted by our counterparts in Europe. And I think it's a warning sign that they're not necessarily fit for purpose.
Yeah, exactly, and that's absolutely a point that we have made. We made an opposition paper in November to the CAA, and hopefully they'll be taking that on board. And I think the CAA are expecting an increase in applications for authorizations, and to cover the costs of disco. And I think that they're going to find they're actually going to drop off, because the European, if they go down this route, because Europe's experience is that the number of people applying for operations or authorizations is really quite small.
So I would say that to complement, so in terms of the transition to SORA, SORA at the end of the day is only a safety methodology. And the good thing about it is that it's been adopted by, I think, 67 countries being part of 𝗂𝗗𝗃. But it seems to me that different countries have adopted it in a different manner. What I'm trying to say is that I hear that in some countries, aviation authorities have implemented it and are doing stuff. For example, I know that in Norway, there are some BV loss operations in maritime environments. I know that there are flights over cities in certain German-speaking countries. So I know that in Canada, if you look at Canada, their way of implementing SORA seems to be relatively straightforward, digitized, and progressive, if you want. And on the other hand, I hear about countries where aviation authorities make a lot of calculations that end up with 100 meters of exclusion zone away from uninvolved people. So that is not necessarily very proportionate. So to a certain
that's quite difficult to do, because that uninvolved person could be moving around. So your 100-meter zone is moving with that person who's moving around.
So, I mean, we need to get more fact-finding about all these different feedback. But at the end of the day, it's up to us in the UK to embrace an international methodology and use it in a proportionate manner and in the right way, so that the industry can grow as opposed to shrink. Absolutely.
That's 100%, and that's I think that sort of leads us on nicely to. Shall I stop sharing my screen now? Look at that one. Leads us nicely to our other call in the paper, which was for actually not to change the PDRA to be more conservative, but to allow us more PDRAs that allow lower risk operations. So I mean, I've always said for ages that the PDRA-01 is great, but it's stymied by the fact that it's for the risk based around a 25-kilogram drone, with worst case scenario being a 25-kilogram drone. So our separations are based on that. Where most of us, I think, are flying at maximum 4-kilogram drones, 4.5-kilogram drones, M300s perhaps, and SPAs at about 3.5 kilograms. Many of us at 1 kilogram with a Mavic 3 Enterprise, just over 1 kilogram with the RTK module on it. So we're really stymied by having a risk based around a 25 kilogram drone. So can we have a PDRA that's based around much lower risk operations that will, say, for example, allow us to have reduced distances from uninvolved people, not always be living with the risk of no overflights being allowed, this constant sort of thing, oh my God, is my overflight going to be taken away from me? And also making it easier. I mean, the other ones we call for 𝗶𝗏 with visual observers, or 𝗍𝗏. Higher heights we've asked for, and also not to be location specific if we do go down that route as well.
Yeah, so we've been promoting new PDRAs for a few years now, and I mean, it's this idea that if we offer a standardized, scalable, digitized, easy recipe that drone operators could use for the lower end of the operations, then they will remain within the remit of the regulations, as opposed to maybe ducking away under, an A2 or in the open category, and actually having those repeat of the DISCO success would actually help grow the industry and ensure that the whole community adheres to a simple set of rules.
100%. I think the argument to be made as well is that from a safety perspective, if we could have more PDRAs allowing lower risk operations within the specific category, the CAA have much better oversight of those operations than they would have if we all moved into the into the open category with A2 CFCs, where they have basically no oversight of those operations. Or even if it gets too complicated, I mean, not that we'd condone this at all, but people operating illegally, which we don't want to see at all.
No, and to be honest, in terms of transition, the CAA made official the transition for a year, but actually, I would suspect that a longer transition, a longer standstill might be required, because when we think for 2 seconds, UK SORA has not been published yet. There will be a transition required for the OSC ORA holders to move, to eventually do their approvals following SORA. I think it's going to take some time on both sides, that is, from the operator side, but as well from the point of view of the UK the CAA inspectors, so that they understand how it works. And then only afterwards will everybody be in a position to draft useful new PDRAs. So that's just it's just a suspicion that we will need more than a year to do a stable transition to more specific new PDRAs. I hope I'm clear. It's going to take some time to absorb it all. And
also, I mean, it's very complicated, SORA. I mean, I'm good with regulation, but SORA, I'm really struggling to get my head around. And I mean, there are people out there with ORAs or OSCs now who are probably fairly used to drawing up risk assessments. So they're going to have to change the methodology that they're doing those risk assessments. But for a lot of us who just want to fly Mavic 3s, it's way too complicated for what we need or want to do. And it would be a shame if we end up having similar to the EASA PDRAs, that we end up having to effectively do a SAIL-1 application, which is going to be massively expensive and complicated for very low risk operations, really.
Yeah, so on this one, 2 points. One is on the more complex operations. I mean, we're going to discover SORA, but my understanding is that it will be of benefit, because as an industry, we will be in a position to do more complex operations in a more structured, quantitative way, and using a methodology that can be copied, pasted internationally, which is good for the industry at large. And it also means that the CAA can align with other aviation authorities and feel comfortable that they're doing the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
A sub point on this one. Sorry, it's me not thinking in a straight line. I think that one of the challenges with SORA is that, in a way, what do you expect if you put 67 aviation authorities in a room with very little input from the drone industry. Then you get a super conservative framework. That's what you get. And so in a way, it's understandable if you want. I mean, I guess none of them would say, oh no, I want to be more lenient and I want to allow this and that. Now, I think it's a time where industry must actually get involved and share the feedback so that there is a rebalance to proportionality in the new methodology.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And proportionality to the whole scale of operations, right from sort of the Mavic 3 inspection surveys right up to large BV loss, point-to-point transport flights. It's it's got to be proportional the whole way through and scalable.
Yeah, fully agree. Gyro starts at 250 grams up to, in the end, several tons. So it's great to have a common methodology, but it's also important to recognize that the bulk of the market today, it's between OpenCat and the left column of the SORA methodology. So, the smaller drones, that's where the core of the market today is. And it's very important to make sure that the core of the market can thrive.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's two things that we've got to make sure that business as usual can be business as usual, and that future flight is enabled as well for growth in the market. And that's what we really, really want to see. Yeah. So,
David, I can see some comments from Annabelle on the chat. That there are plenty of comments on YouTube. But guys, this is our first time, so we're not perfect. I can't see the comments. So, 11 comments. Right. I can see the comments. It just meant that we had to click on comments. So very sorry. Yeah. So if you allow us a little bit of time, David, shall we just try and spend 2 seconds going through some comments and see if we can accommodate some of those? And apologies for everyone who's listening. It's our first time.
So what's they in order, right? So doesn't this work with the CA's interest? They will be worried that removing overflight, introducing SORA at the same time would drop many more AA holders. 250 drones. So yeah, I think to start with, so I think 250 drones. So let's go through this. So doesn't this work? I think the CA. It may drop OA holders. I think that's a point we've actually made to them, isn't it, Anne-Lise?
Yeah, it's the issue that if the regulation is too complex and it becomes, difficult to embrace for a regular person, and like you, David, I find that SORA is complex. It took me several readings of it, and I was reading 2.0 before 2.5. So it's true, it is complex. And so it's going to be difficult for regular operations to follow a SORA. That's why for me, us transitioning to a CL1 application, I mean, unless the CA provides a super easy digitized platform, I'm not sure it's a great idea. I think it's better to replicate some standard recipes like PDRAs. Otherwise, the risk of complex regulation is that compliance declines. I've heard, and I can't quote people or countries, but I know of a country where they have transitioned from their equivalent of our PDRA to the EU one, and they saw the number of specific category operators decline by 1/3. So it is definitely a concern of ours at ARPAS that actually people will just give up and maybe fly in the open category, maybe within the remit of open category, maybe not necessarily, but then there is no one to police them, so it doesn't really matter if they become illegal flyers. I mean, I'm not saying that it is happening, but it is a risk. So it's one of these.
I think the point is we agree with that comment that it could well drop OA holders, and that is a point we have made to the CA. And also similarly to 250 drone's second point about I think DISCO as a process, as in renewing your operational authorization, PDRA and authorization, it's quite slick. It works. It can be done in about 20 minutes, really quite easily. yeah, agree with you with the doubling the fees. Again, a point we've made to the CA, and another point we've made to them said, yeah, you want to. It's if you double the fees, you might find a lot more OA holders falling away, and actually you end up taking less money in from operational authorisations than you would do because of people not bothering to renew. Yeah, I mean, and they have a few lose overflights on PDRA-01. I mean, we desperately don't want to do that, and that's something, a point we are making.
So, guys, I think it's going to be difficult to respond to all questions live. We're not perfect public speakers, but we've got them here, and we can follow up maybe directly with some of you guys. David, are there some additional points you would like to make before we wrap up?
No, I think I've got all the points over that I was hoping to make. I mean, it's a conversation that Anne-Lise and I have had quite a lot recently, isn't it?
Yeah, yes. And so maybe what we can say in terms of wrap up is for drone operators to stay engaged, stay tuned, your voice matters. Now that PDRA-01 is on standstill in a way, that 95% of the specific category can, will be operating in stability. The major evolution will be for the OSC holders with the introduction of UK SORA in 2025. So I think for us as a trade body, purely on the regulatory side, that will be one of our main focus. And then maybe message for policymakers and aviation authorities is that it's good not always to be absolutely pioneering stuff. For now that we've got the return of experience of what is happening in Europe, let's listen to what's happening and draw the conclusions so that we can actually support the industry and be smarter about our regulation.
I think I'd just like to add to, we are listening to the members, and we do make these points to the CIA, and hopefully with some influence.
Yep. Yeah. Operating behind the scene.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, David.
Thank you. See you soon. Take care. Bye.
Bye.